And we are back after a bit of a hiatus. Uh, Today, we are going to be talking about flip phones and folding phones, but more so on flip phones. Samsung just released their Fold 5 and Flip 5. Motorola recently released their new Razr. Um, we're going to talk about whether or not this is a fad or if it's the future. We're going to talk a little bit about repair on these. And see what the future kind of holds. Because I got some questions. Um, I guess we'll start with what was recently released, which was the Samsung side. So when Samsung first dropped the Fold, the first one, I thought maybe folding phones was going to be a gimmick. To be honest with you, the thing is clunky. I mean, it's cool in that it folds out into a tablet-sized device. So you wouldn't necessarily have a need for like a mini tablet or like an iPad mini if you had, a fold phone. That being said, they are very expensive. They're very expensive to repair
Mhm.
if you need to repair them. Um, Durability is an issue with them. Our joke back in the place I used to work at is that these phones were meant to last a year and not longer than that. And usually phones are going to last 2 or more years. Um, and they're super awkward to put in the pocket, the Fold is. Um, but that didn't stop Pixel and Google from coming out with their own version of the Fold recently. We're now at our fifth generation of the Samsung Fold. There are other companies that have launched Fold devices. We've yet to see Apple do anything as of yet. But I can't say that this trend is a gimmick anymore if we're 5 generations into
And
it.
everyone but Apple, all the major players seem to be.
Right, everyone but Apple seems to be digging in it. But even Apple, though, Apple has patents out right now with folding screens attached to those patents. So clearly they've been testing something. Um, the current rumor with Apple is that we're going to see maybe next year a folding iPad and then maybe a folding phone in 2025. Um, but they've been very quiet on it. But we're in the here and now, 2023, and we're at the fold and we're at the flip. And as I was as I had mentioned in previous videos, I almost got myself a Flip 4. I was pretty determined to get one because I like the idea of having a device that can fold into something that'll fit more comfortably into a pocket. Um, Ended up not going with it because the Flip is still a pretty expensive phone. It's a flagship priced phone, but you're not getting flagship, you know, things with it, right? The processor was slower, the battery's smaller, the camera's not as good. What you're paying an extra for is the flip side, right? You're paying for the design, but you're not getting the features that you normally get with the flagship phone. That's not really the case now. The Flip 5 has a lot of the same things that my S23 Plus has. That's a flagship phone. The processor is the same, so it's going to be way more efficient when it comes to battery. You have the large display on the front now. What else did they do? So they have the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 uh, processor. The um, the new outer display is called the Flex window. Is that
Yeah, that's
what
the new
Samsung
term.
is calling it?
I don't think
It's
anyone
the
calls it
Flex
that except for
window.
Samsung, but
Um, it's a okay. Well, Samsung's calling it the Flex window, right? It's Apple has their dynamic island, right? That's an Apple thing. And we got the Flex window on the Flip 5. The big thing that I saw um, was the new hinge. So Samsung's using a new hinge on their Flip series. So when you close it, it's
Yeah,
a much
zero
more
gap.
flush kind of. I think it's they call it a tear. Is it a teardrop style?
I've just been hearing zero gap, but
Is what
and if
the
you go
hinge shape
into some of like the Best Buys,
zero gap.
you can tell it's a zero gap, but
Mm-hmm.
you have to be careful because there's a the security still could create that gap a little bit, but you should be able to tell the difference.
Mm-hmm. So, um, but that's a big thing with the folding series at Samsung's is the new hinge. Another thing that when I was doing my research for this topic is the fold phones seem to still very much be kind of a niche kind of device. So only certain people are really going after that standard size phone that folds out into a larger, tablet sized phone. But it's actually the flip phones that are outselling the folds, and I believe 70% of Samsung's folding sales, 70% of them are the flip, and the other 30% would be the fold. So the flip is
Well,
selling better
financially, that makes
than the fold
sense.
is.
They're
So the flip might
more financial comparables. The
so it's right. It's more affordable. The flip is, but I think just for practical usage, the flip is going to fit in pockets better. It's going to fit women's
yeah,
clothing a bit better. Women's clothing. And my wife complains all the time about the size of her pockets in her clothes, which is why she's always handing me things to put in my pockets. Um, so the flip has more of an appeal aesthetically, and it's more practical versus the fold. The fold will turn a lot of people like me. It'll turn a lot of people off because of how thick that boy is. So, and then of course Um, Motorola has their Razr out. Um, it's it's got a lot of the same features as the Flip 5 does, except it's not going to be as fast. It's got, I believe, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chip in it. um, I know you personally have had your hands on both the Flip 5 and the Razr, and you said that the overall feel
the
of the Flip 5 was better than the
in
Motorola.
regards to the hinge,
Um,
for sure, the feel if you're just folding and unfolding both of those devices,
mm,
the hinge on the razor, you can feel something happening there. It's not as smooth. So, and if you're feeling the hinge on the Flip 5, it's much more smooth, and less clunky. You don't feel like something funky's happening,
mm,
for sure.
yeah. Well, that goes in line with our typical impression of
Yeah.
Samsung versus Motorola, and that Motorola is. uh, well, I'll say that Samsung is more premium when it comes to their build quality. Um, and when you hold a flagship Samsung device, it feels premium, and it feels like it's $1,000 phone.
It is
I believe the
yeah,
Razor is the
the
same
razor.
price, though you can. I know that there are certain deals where you can
Yeah.
get it, you know, cheaper. But my experience with comparing the two companies is that Motorola phone is cheaper, but it also feels cheaper um, versus the Samsung. That doesn't always necessarily mean that the Samsung is better than the Motorola. I was most of the time I would say that is the case, but um, I'm not here to toot Samsung's horn at all with this. But I wanted to kind of highlight where we're currently at with flip phones. And then on the repair side, again, I did some research on this. So, folding phones are expensive to repair. If you crack the main screen um, on any of the folding devices, whether it's a
Right.
flip or a fold, then it doesn't matter which brand. Uh, the repair cost is going to be high, right? We're talking $300 plus to get the just the part. The labor involved is a lot more versus doing a repair on like a iPhone
And then the risk
or a
of the
Samsung
repair
Galaxy
is higher.
S3. Um, the risk of repair is higher because it's more in depth. Now, when it comes to cost, um, the standard phones that are the flagship level phones, the cost on those parts have also
Mm.
skyrocketed today versus what they were at even a couple years ago. So I was looking online, and even for what's interesting about it is if I want to go and I want to get a genuine part for my Samsung Galaxy S23, the Plus, um, a genuine part replacement with frame is going to cost me around 180-ish dollars. That's actually about $100 less than what the part used to cost a few years ago. Um, so, if I had like the S21 Ultra from 2 years ago, the same part would have cost me around $300. That's what it would cost if I have an iPhone 14 Pro. Is going to be in the $300+ range to fix. Um, Pixel, the Pixel 7 Pro is going to be in that kind of $200+. So flagship devices, even though those repairs are easier, they're less involved when it comes to actually doing the repairs. So the risk of repair is actually lower. The cost is about the same now, or it's not so outrageous compared to what like the flip was originally. If you had like the fold of the original fold or even the flip, the first flip, I mean the replacement cost of the folding screen was in the $500+ range. Um, and now Samsung may be doing discounted
Yeah,
repairs
the
on
flip,
the new folding.
Samsung has promised a
So
$200 screen repair, and for the Fold, a $250 screen repair. Now they haven't, that I know of, announced the details on how to fulfill that, but um, more to come on that.
yeah, so yeah, we don't know if you can get if you can get the part for that cost and do it yourself, or if you have to send it in or go to an authorized repair center for that. Um, but when I first got into phone repair 5 years ago, uh, on the latest iPhone, the newest iPhone, which at the time I think was the iPhone 8 Plus or maybe the 10. Um, the screen cost maxed out at like $200 if it was the iPhone 10. If it was the iPhone 8 Plus, you could get screens for 40 or $50, or less than that. So like everything else, with inflation and whatnot, and here in 2023, the cost to replace parts on these phones has skyrocketed. Um, and we're seeing the cost on these folds because we're a couple generations into these now. The cost on those have actually gone down, compared to the other flagship phones that the pricing has actually gone up with, which is interesting. And so if you're out there and you're in the market for a phone and you're like, well, I'm not going to get a flip because of the potential repair cost over, um, an iPhone, 14 Pro or a Galaxy S23 Ultra or something like that. That repair cost is beginning to get negligible, which is interesting. But still, the repair side itself is much more in depth when it comes to the folding devices versus your standard devices. Today you can do
Mm.
an iPhone screen replacement in 10 minutes or less on an iPhone 14 Pro. Pixel 7 Pro can be done in 15 minutes or less. S23 can be done in 20 minutes or less. for someone who's done it before anyway. Um, they're not super in depth repairs. Um, so, but that it's an interesting take on folding phones and where we're heading with those. um,
The
what do you have
flip
any additional
5.
thoughts on the repair side?
Uh, is that what you're asking of the flip
You like
5
the Flip
screen
Five?
repair?
Yeah, yeah. On
I
on
know
the Flip or the Fold,
that's
do you
about
have
it, I guess. I mean, I still wouldn't want
any insight on that?
to do the repair on those, and I still think that there's a problem with the repairability of those devices, despite some of the kind of the positive things coming out, like some of the positive trends, like you were mentioning. But
Mm-hmm. Right. So yeah, that's the big thing with them is even though repair costs is coming down, there's still the problem of the phones still really being 1 year phones. I know that when the Flip 4 and the Fold 4 came out, that Samsung said that they had fixed the issue with
right,
the screen protector. Right, supposedly they put some sort of new adhesive on it, and it was supposed to be like an unpeelable screen protector. But we still hear people having to replace their screen protectors within a year, and Samsung has a warranty on that, and you
right,
can get yours replaced, but it's still a problem. And so we'll see if this new hinge thing is a big fix for them when it comes to reliability on these phones. But we don't have we no, there's not a ton of people that we know that have these flip phones. You know, uh, I don't know anyone personally, as far as a friend, that has a fold phone. We both had a coworker and friend that had a flip phone for about 2 weeks before he went back to his Ultra because he didn't like the flip. Um, but we still got a lot of people, a lot of friends that are in the business on the repair side, and they're still seeing problems, hinge problems, and screen protector problems that are common with the folding devices. um, so the next big thing with this is um, when Apple, and I think it's when Apple joins this. I don't think it's if Apple comes out with a folding device. I think it's a when. I think they're gonna launch something because Samsung's pretty adamant about making the flip and the fold the thing in the future. Um, if and when Apple joins and they offer their their iFlip phone, is that going to be? Do you think that's going to be the big game changer and
well,
the future's all going to
I
be
don't know if
flip
everything's gonna
and folding
be flip
phones,
and
or do you think
fold at
it's
that point, but I do think it's gonna be pretty big for Apple, and pretty bad for the rest of the market, because we know that Apple doesn't mess around. They have some good products, and um, I would say that from my experience, a lot of Apple users are curious about these devices and are looking, either looking or switching to you know either Motorola or Samsung to check out these devices. And I don't think that they're going to be willing
hmm,
to even entertain that once they have an in-house option.
hmm. So that's my experience as well when talking to anybody. It's really hard to get people who are
But they're
ingrained into iOS to switch out of
right.
it. And it's the same thing for Android people too. It's hard to get Android people into iOS, and I would say it's even harder to get iOS people into Android. um, but yeah, a lot of iPhone users are curious. I rock two phones, but um, for me, I'm super curious about it too. I have an iPhone 13 Pro Max, which in the pocket is massive. Um, but the phone is fast and it gives me great battery life. Same with the S23 Plus. It's a giant phone that's in the pocket, great battery life. But when I was shopping for phones and I was able to take a Mach Flip 4 and put it in the pocket, that phone feels way better. Um, and it's a device that's going to be on me, from the time that I get dressed in the morning until I go to bed at night. It's something that's usually in my pocket. So, it's important, and I know it's important to a lot of people. But we'll see what Apple comes out with, because Apple does, 50% of the market is basically Apple as it is. The other thing that Apple does that's better than everyone else in in not just the tech industry, but in general, is they market better than everyone. I mean, think of a company that markets better than Apple. I can't think of anybody that markets better than Apple. Um, so when they do launch a foldable device,
Yeah,
I think it's gonna fly off the shelves. Um, yeah. So if folding devices is going to go mainstream,
it's an interesting
I think it'll
perspective for
happen
sure.
when Apple
So you
joins
think that the whole market is going to
when Apple joins the
expand for
flock.
folding phones with
Yeah.
Apple? I just kind of think it's going to end for the Android world, because I think the a lot of the growth is from Apple users coming over, um, and checking it out. I mean, you almost did that, right? Um, and so I think that's kind of my point or my contention.
Hmm.
It's interesting to see though if we think the actual size of the flip and fold market will expand with Apple joining it.
Hmm. So I think the so I think that I, the growth that Samsung is seeing is not all iPhone users making the jump. Um, I think that's a very small percentage of their actual sales is iPhone people making the jump over, um, because it's the iOS versus Android is so polarizing for people, and um, I don't think there are going to be Android people who are going to be coming over to Apple because they offer a folding device. I don't
No,
think the Samsung user right now is waiting for
but
Apple.
all of
I
the
think your
people that are
typical
considering, well,
Samsung
a
person
majority
is
of the
loyal to
people, a
Samsung.
grand majority of the people that are looking at Samsung phones are looking at the flips, and all of that ends. None of them will be considering Samsung
Mm.
flips when they've got an in-house option. So I think it will. I'm talking huge numbers,
Yeah.
greater than 50%, something closer to 80% of the people on the fence for the next phone looking at a Samsung phone, maybe switching from iPhone. Um, it's going to end that decision. I think they will no longer. So
Hmm. Yeah, I would agree that
it's going to
that
end.
all the iPhone
Yeah.
users who are right now sniffing around the Flip 5 right now, it's going to end. Yeah. And so I think your growth is certainly going to slow for Samsung and for everyone else that offers a folding phone once Apple has their own to cater to iOS users. There's going to be zero reason for an iOS user to make the jump. But that being said, there are still going to be your Android users, current Android users
True.
that aren't going to, they're not going to flip over the fence to go to Apple. So So I think, well, while Samsung's growth is going to slow down in the segment, I don't think it's going to go away. I don't think it's going to kill flip and folding phones for Samsung, um, especially internationally. Right now Samsung's doing really well internationally. So, and they market a lot better internationally than they do here in the States. Um, so, I don't think it'll be the death of the Android folding once Apple goes, but the segment itself is gonna explode when Apple has something to launch. So as long as they make it somewhat compelling, and it and I, and to be honest, I would be interested myself depending on the price of it too, right? So
Right.
if they offer the iFlip and it's $2,000, I'm
Like,
not going to get it. Doesn't matter how good it is. But if it's in the same price range as their, if it's competing against the Flip Five and it's $1,000, yeah, probably I'm probably going to entertain the idea if they execute it well. And the thing with Apple right now is Apple used to be the big innovator company. They were the ones that came out with the iPhone and the iPad, and they had the iPod too, and they were really leading the charge when it came to innovation. And then sometime around like 2012, they just stopped innovating. They started copying, and they're just like, we're gonna copy what other people are doing. We're just gonna do it better than them. So, um, you know, obviously they're not going to be the first with a flip phone to come out, but they're probably going to execute it as good, if not better, than what Samsung is offering. Right, especially because they're just going to let Samsung, keep coming out with new generation, and 6 or 7 generations into folding phones, Apple's just going to be like,
right.
well, you guys, this is what we
And
learned from your
and it might
failure over the
benefit
first six
Samsung.
generations of
Jerry
this, and
Rig
now we
anything,
think we've
Jerry Rig
perfected
everything
it.
was kind of talking about that. He was speculating in that video we were watching. I think you were going to mention that in this podcast, but uh, um, anyways, that I was watching one of those videos. I think it was the one comparing. Comparing. It was a teardown of the Flip and the Motorola, uh, and he was mentioning that both of the hinges look very similar. Now, I'm not sure if I completely agree with him. There looked like there was some compression going on in the Flip
Mm-hmm.
5 that wasn't going on in the Motorola, but nonetheless, he was wondering, is some of that, so are some of those parts being, used? I know Samsung, shares a lot, sells a lot of parts to other companies. Um, Apple has a lot of chips that are come from Samsung and that sort of thing. And so,
Mm-hmm.
it might be possible that Apple does build on a lot of the success Samsung has, and Samsung probably will benefit from that as well. It's interesting to think about.
Yeah. Well, yeah, a lot of these companies, they buy parts from these other companies, right? So for Apple specifically, most of their iPhones, I believe the iPhones that have the OLEDs in them are Samsung OLEDs in the iPhones. I think now I believe Apple is coming out with their
Yeah,
own screen that they're
interesting.
going to be using in
Gonna break up with
the
them.
future. They're trying to step away from Samsung in that aspect, but in the Jerry Organi thing, in the video that we saw with when he was comparing the hinges, he was just like, oh, well, maybe
Right. Yeah.
Motorola was using Samsung's hinge. It was kind of his. He was implying it. He was just like, oh, it's nice of Samsung to be sharing technology with these other devices. Although it's Samsung that came out with the new hinge this year, the zero gap hinge that they're using, is a so Motorola has been using that hinge since the first Razr, I think. So maybe
Hmm.
Samsung actually innovated off of what Motorola was doing in that aspect. I don't know. Um, but but yeah, all these companies are, they're competing with each other, but they also will license out their own patents and designs to other companies. You know, so it's one of the things that Samsung's doing with their anti-repair stuff right now, and trying to impose the OLED embargo, basically. Um, but it's like, how do we know what is contraband OLED versus not contraband OLED? Because if they're selling their own OLED screens to everyone else to use in their devices, other brands, how do we know which ones are not, which ones are counterfeit OLEDs versus not counterfeit OLEDs? Anyway, so, but yeah, it is interesting. We'll see what happens in the future. We'll see what happens when Apple decides to get in on this folding fad, or maybe 5 years from now, a flip phone is going to be the rage, which is going to just it's going to come full circle, because you and I, just the old geezers that you and I are, we had our flip phones
Yep.
back in 2002 and whatnot. Technology is going to come full circle like that. It's crazy. You heard it here first. In 2030, the majority of people are going to have flip phones, but not like they were in 2002.
Sounds good.
What do you think? It's a good end it there. Perfect. Well, for anyone who's made it this far, hey, thanks for listening or watching.